Hi there. This is the first of 3 videos where I will acquaint you with the installation and operation of an operating system in VMware Player as a virtual system which is running under your host system. In my case, this is Windows 7, and we will install Windows 10 TP, the beta version, because there we don't need a product key. We could have installed a Linux system also, where we don't need a product key, but I thought for Windows users they may be more familiar with the installation of a Windows system. But before I go in medias res, let me just acquaint you with my setup here so that you don't get too discombobulated with all these disks I'm using. One disk we will be using is the disk that is here, which contains all my virtual systems. These are all the virtual systems I currently have. There are a few Linux systems, mostly Mint-made versions. There is already a Windows 10 installation and a Windows 10 Update installation. There is a Windows 8, actually it's 8.1, and there is also another Linux system, which is Zorin. Now all those systems are folders, and they are sitting on an external SSD. Those folders can be anywhere. They can be in your documents, in your music if you want so, in your program files. They can be on an external disk. It better be a fast disk, that's why I'm using an SSD, or in a fast USB 3 stick. So the folders are just folders. Let's just look here what's in those folders. There are all kinds of files in the folders. This one here, the VMX file, you will sometimes use. I will explain that in the second video. Okay, so much for the place where we will put our virtual system. And now here's another disk that we will be using, which is called Handy. It's also an external disk, but this is a USB 2 disk. And here I have all my programs, Access and ISOs that I ever downloaded, quite a few. And here we also will find our Windows 10 ISO. Here's the Windows 10 ISO, the beta ISO is right here. So we will be using that. So much for disks that we will be using. So let's look at VMware Player, which is this one. Okay, as you see here, I have all these systems you saw on the external SSD that I can launch from here. Actually, this Mint KDE I don't even have anymore. So if you want to remove something, you just right click on it and remove. And we will not launch any of those. We will create a new one. You can create a new one. You can open a virtual machine, which you will have to do when you moved the folder. And you can upgrade to VMware Workstation, which costs, of course, money, and there's a help button. Okay, we will create a new machine. Okay, from where do we get our ISO? Not from a disk, not from a DVD. We will get it from the system itself, actually from my little external disk here. We will get the ISO file, and we will browse for that. Now it happens to be here already because I've been playing around earlier with it. So it's in Downloads G, which is the external disk, Windows 10 ISO beta. So we will double click on that, and now VMware Player knows about it. That's all you have to do here. Next, we choose the operating system that we install. Obviously we install Windows. Now you could install Linux or Novell or Solaris or something else, another operating system. In fact, I once installed an Android under VMware Player, which works okay, but it's not really big fun. Anyhow, so these are all the Windows systems that you can install. Well, all the way down to Windows 3.1, ME, who wants ME? 2000, which is a nice one, all kinds of server versions, etc., etc. XP may be interesting for those people that still need XP for some reason, and of course Vista and Windows 7. And we go with Windows 8 64-bit because there is not yet an update for VMware Player for Windows 10. It's too new. So we go with that. So Windows 8 x64 because that's a 64-bit ISO that I have. So we go to next. Here you have to do two things. First, unless you want it to call Windows 8 x64, you give it a name, and we call it 10 test. And here you choose a location where you want to install it. So we are going to browse to our external SSD. In computer we go, and in computer we have to find our virtual systems, which is F here. And in virtual systems we will make, see, here's all these made systems and Windows 10 update and Windows 10 and Windows 8. We'll make a new folder for it. Okay, a new folder, and we'll call it 10 test as we have before. Okay, just so that we have consistency of names, and we OK that. Okay, now it knows where to install it, and we have given the baby a name. And we go to next. Here, this is the virtual disk. It makes a default allocation of 60 gigabytes for Windows systems. For Linux systems it makes I think 20 gigabyte default allocation, and you might as well leave it at that because that's a dynamic allocation. In the beginning it will only use this particular one here will only use 5-6 gigabytes, and eventually will go to 10 and 20 and 30 depending on how they upgrade Windows 10 and how much you install on it. If you install a lot of programs on it, of course it will grow like any operating system. Down here it defaults to a split disk into multiple files. I don't like that because it uses unnecessary room on your in your folder or on your SSD in my case. I like to store it in a single file. That has always worked well for me, but I guess it's neither here nor there. It's up to you. And we go to next, and we are already done with the setup for for that part. But now we can customize the hardware. Okay, the default allocation for a Windows system is 2 gigabytes. For a Linux system it would be 1 gigabyte or 512 megabyte depending on which distro you have. 2 gigabyte is probably a reasonable amount, but it will depend on how much RAM you have. If you have 4 gigabyte of RAM, 2 gigabyte is a good choice. That will leave another 2 gigabyte for your host system, in my case Windows 7. If you have only 3 gigabytes, maybe you want to allocate only 1 gigabyte to the virtual partition. Windows 10 will still run in 1 gigabyte. Runs better in 2, of course. But I'm generous because I have 8 gigabytes and I give it 4 gigabytes. Okay, the next setting you want to make is processors. Here again depends on what processor you have. If you have a dual core, then the number of processor is 1. That's the default, because you need 1 core for your host system. But I have 8 cores, so I can be here generous again. I give it 3 cores. Okay, that's about all you have to do here, except I recommend you go to the USB controller. It's set to USB 3. I found this is a little iffy. You better set it to USB 2. That works better, I think. And check this box here, show all USB input devices. Okay, well, that's all that we have to do here, and we close it, and we finish here, and we are already in processing mode. Here you could go back to make the settings we have just done. We don't need to do that, but at a later time if you want to change the settings, and you always have to change them before you start running the virtual system. Whilst you're running you cannot change it. but we want to play virtual machine, which means we want to start the virtual machine. Now starting in this case means we are starting the Windows installation. Here's our Windows 10 logo already, and let's run that for a little while to see what's happening. I will pause when it gets too boring. Uh, See, it does the usual thing that you get during an installation on a real system, same thing. Okay, this is your usual first page where it asks for the language, English, time and currency, the United States type, and keyboard input. I have a QWERTY keyboard, which is a US keyboard, so I don't have to change anything here. I just go to next. Um, and now it already says install, so we'll install. So now it starts the setup, and let's just run that for a little bit because there is something coming up that you might want to see. Again, this is standard Windows, but here you have to accept their license agreement, and you go to next. And here you don't want to upgrade it, don't want to do an upgrade install, you want to make a custom install. And you install it to this drive, which is a 30 gigabyte virtual drive here, the dynamic drive that we talked about earlier. Okay, and you go to next, and now it's copying files and so on and so forth, and that takes a long time. So for that time, I will just hold the video. Just to show you that things are happening. It is getting ready. It copied all the files, did all the updates, and now it's doing more settings. And let's just see how that plows on. It went through a couple of reboots, and all the basic settings are done, and now we have more settings, and we use the express settings here. And now checking my internet connection, which it should have. This is, by the way, automatic. That's one advantage when you run under VMware Player. You use all the host facilities that are there. You don't have to worry about drivers or anything like that. Okay, now we'll set up my account. I have a Microsoft account. The advantage of that is that you get all your settings of your previous installation. So my previous Windows 10 installation will be more or less carried over in terms of the desktop picture, in terms of settings, etc., etc. So I'll stop the video again here because I don't want to publish my email address to the world. Oops, it doesn't work. Oh, by the way, that's an interesting one. See that cursor? That cursor was in the virtual machine, and of course nothing in my host system reacts where my recorder is, so I have to move the cursor to the host system in order to. Now here, typical Microsoft, they couldn't continue with me just giving my Microsoft ID. They have to send you a code to your email, which you have to enter. But you cannot copy and paste it because we don't have the VMware tools yet, which would allow copy and paste across system boundaries here. We'll have to actually manually enter it, and I have put it here on a notepad, and let me see whether I can remember that. 4455915. Let's see whether that works. 4455915. Okay, that was a code. Let's see whether it accepted it. Looks like it did. Keep it around just in case. Okay, and here, how should we set up your PC? Well, you set it up VMware as a VMware player. So you take this default that they have highlighted, and you go to next, And now they're setting up my account, and that again is pretty boring, so I will stop the video for a little while. It's business as usual. Hooray, we made it! Okay, here's my desktop from my previous Windows 10 installation, which they picked up, my little birdie that I like so much. And my settings, for example, I do not really fancy this Windows 10 start little start box. I prefer the old 8.1 start, the whole start page. So they use that setting also, which is nice. And for the rest, I won't go into setup here because that is something that we will discuss in the next section. The whole setup procedure, not so much the Windows 7 particular setup, but also the particular items along the VMware player. So let me stop here, and I will see you in the next tutorial.